Some people fear being alone. Society whispers in our ears that solitude is loneliness, that the person who walks alone is the person who has failed. But what if the opposite were true? What if in solitude you find the strongest version of yourself? What if the quiet moments, the time spent alone, are the greatest gifts you could ever receive? We live in a world that values constant engagement. We are told that to be surrounded by others is to be successful, that the more people we interact with, the more fulfilled we will become. But deep down, many feel exhausted, stretched thin by the never-ending noise of external influences. What if the true antidote to this exhaustion was not found in doing more, but in stepping back? When we are younger, we take the value of solitude for granted, but as we age and get older, we realize just how important and powerful solitude can be. In our youth, solitude feels like something we should avoid, something that suggests rejection or failure. But as we grow, we begin to see solitude for what it truly is: a tool for self-discovery, an opportunity for transformation, a means of strengthening the mind. The Stoics understood this well. Seneca, Marcus Aurelius, and Epictetus did not merely tolerate solitude, they embraced it. It was in solitude that their wisdom deepened, that their minds sharpened, and that they prepared themselves to face the world with unbreakable composure. Solitude gave them the space to examine their thoughts, to question their assumptions, to refine their beliefs. It gave them the strength to be independent, to stand firm in their convictions, even when surrounded by chaos. Solitude is not isolation. It is not an escape from reality, but a confrontation with it. To be alone is to see yourself clearly, without the noise and distortion of external influences. It is to cultivate inner strength, to master your thoughts, and to emerge wiser, calmer, and more powerful. Those who fear solitude often fear their own minds. But the Stoics taught that the mind is a sanctuary, a place where you can retreat at any moment to find peace. This is not a retreat into darkness. This is a path to light. Solitude does not mean shutting yourself away from the world forever. It means learning to balance engagement with introspection. It means stepping away from the crowd long enough to hear your own voice, to refine your thoughts, to develop an unshakable foundation. When you embrace solitude, you become someone who is no longer dependent on external validation. You become someone who can walk alone and still feel whole. Solitude is your salvation. It is the key to a clearer mind, a stronger spirit, and an unbreakable sense of self. Chapter 1. The Art of Disappearing. To disappear is not to vanish into obscurity. It is to step away from the distractions, from the meaningless noise, and to reclaim yourself. The world is loud, but wisdom is found in the silence between the noise. The person who embraces solitude does not disappear into nothingness. He becomes something greater, something untethered from the constant pull of society's expectations. The Stoics spoke often of retreat, not to escape duty, but to refine the mind. Marcus Aurelius himself, Emperor of Rome, wrote, "People try to retreat into the countryside, into the mountains, but you yourself are free to retreat into your own mind. This is the ultimate sanctuary. Yet, this retreat is not passive. It is an active reshaping of the self. To disappear from the trivial is to appear in the meaningful. To withdraw from shallow engagements is to deepen one's connection with truth." The modern world does not encourage solitude. It demands engagement, socialization, and endless noise. Technology ensures that there is rarely a moment without stimulation. The pressure to be visible, to participate in the unceasing digital dialogue, is relentless. The expectation is to be constantly accessible, constantly engaged, constantly consuming. People fear being alone not because solitude is inherently bad, but because they have been conditioned to believe that silence is an empty void rather than a sanctuary. But the man who dares to disappear, even for a while, finds something precious. He finds himself. He finds clarity. He finds strength. When you remove yourself from the whirlwind of opinions, expectations, and obligations, you begin to see the world and yourself more clearly. The distractions fade, and the truth of who you are and what you truly value emerges. The noise of society is like a fog, and solitude is the sunlight that burns it away. Solitude is not about physical disappearance alone. It is about mental withdrawal from that which does not serve you. It is about choosing where to invest your attention, what to give your energy to, and what to allow into your mental space. The modern mind is cluttered with unnecessary inputs, the latest news, endless social feeds, a barrage of trivial concerns. But to cultivate solitude is to reclaim your mind from this invasion. It is about creating an inner space that cannot be intruded upon by the outside world. To master solitude is to master independence. It is the art of being self-contained, of finding peace without requiring the presence of others to validate your existence. It is the silent power of those who stand firm, unshaken, guided only by their own reason and virtue. The true Stoic does not fear solitude. He understands that the ability to be alone is the ability to be free. He cultivates his mind so that his thoughts become his companions. He relishes moments of silence as opportunities to reflect, to strategize, to grow. The disappearance from the superficial allows for an emergence into something far deeper, something unbreakable. It is in these moments of quiet that he sharpens his character, trains his mind, and prepares himself for life's inevitable challenges. The more you learn to sit with yourself, the more you realize how little you actually need. Many seek constant validation because they have never built an inner world rich enough to sustain them. They need distractions because they cannot bear their own company. But the man who embraces solitude realizes that everything he needs, strength, wisdom, clarity, is already within him. The more he withdraws from the unnecessary, the more powerful he becomes in his ability to act with purpose, to see through illusions, and to navigate life without fear. Start small. Dedicate 30 minutes each day to solitude. No phone, no distractions. Walk in nature, sit in silence. Let your thoughts settle. Observe how your mind resists, then watch as clarity begins to emerge. Over time, expand this practice. Extend your moments of solitude, turning them into hours of deliberate self-exploration. Begin to see solitude not as an absence of company, but as the presence of something far greater, an untapped well of strength within yourself. It is in solitude that you meet the deepest parts of who you are, stripped of pretension, expectation, and distraction. It is within these silent moments that you build an unshakable foundation of self-trust, self-reliance, and resilience. Those who cannot be alone are not truly free. They are bound to the opinions and presence of others, their moods dictated by external forces. But the person who embraces solitude finds a boundless world within. It is here that ideas take form, that creativity flourishes, and that one's internal compass grows stronger. The more time spent in solitude, the more in tune you become with yourself, your values, and your true purpose. In solitude, you are not alone. You are in the best company possible, your own. It is where you cultivate the discipline to be still, the wisdom to observe yourself without illusion, and the patience to refine your thoughts before they become words or actions. The greatest minds in history, from the Stoics to the modern visionaries, all understood the necessity of solitude. It was their training ground, their sanctuary, their source of clarity. Learn to be comfortable in your own presence, and soon you will realize that solitude is not a prison. It is a liberation. It is the path to self-mastery, the art of turning inward to refine and sharpen the mind. It is the crucible where your best self is forged, strengthened, and prepared to emerge into the world with an unbreakable spirit and an unshakable will. Chapter 2. Knowing Thyself. To know yourself is the greatest journey you will ever undertake. Solitude is the mirror that reflects your true self, not the self that others expect, not the self shaped by social conditioning, but the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are. It is the place where you shed external influences and begin to recognize your true thoughts, desires, and values. Without solitude, you risk living a life that is not truly yours, dictated by the expectations and judgments of others. Most people do not know themselves. They adopt identities given to them by family, culture, and peers. They spend their days playing roles rather than embracing their authentic selves. They become reflections of external expectations rather than manifestations of their inner truth. Their lives become a series of performances, carefully curated to fit societal norms rather than genuine expressions of their inner being. They are never alone long enough to strip away the illusions. They never step back far enough to truly question, who am I beneath all of this? The Stoics believed in self-examination. Epictetus taught that we must challenge our own beliefs, question our own assumptions, and strip away what is false. It is only through this ruthless self-inquiry that we can begin to construct a foundation of wisdom and authenticity. Without solitude, this process is impossible. Surrounded by constant influences, how can one differentiate between their own thoughts and those imposed upon them by others? How can one cultivate true self-awareness if they are never given the space to hear themselves think? In solitude, you hear your true thoughts. It is where the external noise fades and the voice within you grows louder. It is where you can finally separate the conditioned responses from your genuine instincts. In solitude, you face your fears. You confront the uncomfortable truths that you might otherwise avoid when surrounded by distractions. You come face to face with your flaws, your insecurities, and your doubts. You realize how much of your anxiety, stress, and self-doubt stem not from within, but from a world that demands you conform. But more importantly, you uncover your strengths. You recognize your resilience, your untapped potential, and the courage you never realized you had. You begin to see that you are more than your circumstances, more than your reputation, more than the expectations placed upon you. Solitude is not an escape from life, but an immersion into it. It is where self-awareness is cultivated, where your personal philosophy is refined, and where clarity emerges. Solitude is the forge where wisdom is tempered, where emotions are examined rather than reacted to, and where the mind sharpens itself against the grindstone of introspection. In the stillness, you gain the ability to perceive things as they are, without the distortions imposed by the expectations of others. When you embrace solitude, you become unshakable. You no longer seek approval, for you have already approved of yourself. You no longer fear the judgments of others, for you have already judged yourself with honesty. You no longer feel lost, for you have already mapped the landscape of your own mind. The more time you spend alone, the more you realize that you are not truly alone at all. You are in the company of your thoughts, your ideas, and your deepest wisdom. In this companionship, you find something far more valuable than social validation: self-mastery. True solitude allows you to engage with your own mind, uninterrupted by the distractions that keep most people from ever knowing themselves. In solitude, your values crystallize. You become attuned to your own nature, free from the currents of social influence. You begin to understand the difference between what you truly desire and what you have been conditioned to want. You become your own advisor, your own teacher, your own master. Solitude does not make you lonely. It makes you whole. The greatest thinkers, the most profound creators, and the strongest individuals in history have all embraced solitude as a source of power. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations in Solitude, reflecting upon life, virtue, and the fleeting nature of human existence. Seneca advised practicing self-exile in one's mind, removing oneself from the trivial and the transient. Nietzsche declared that great thoughts are born in solitude. To be alone is to grant yourself the time and space to become extraordinary. In solitude, the mind no longer seeks escape, but instead seeks understanding. It sees its own weaknesses and devises ways to strengthen them. It recognizes its fears and builds the courage to confront them. The man who masters solitude masters his own destiny, for he is no longer swayed by fleeting pleasures or the shifting tides of public opinion. He is rooted, steadfast, and unwavering. Solitude is the fire that burns away illusion. It is the path to deep wisdom, to lasting strength, and to a clarity that most people will never experience. When you cultivate solitude, you cultivate a fortress within yourself, one that no force in the external world can breach. And in that fortress, you will find the greatest treasure of all, the knowledge that you are enough, exactly as you are. Set aside time each day to engage in self-reflection. Write. Take a notebook and spill your thoughts onto paper. Ask yourself, who am I when no one is watching? Be brutally honest. Observe your habits, your fears, your reactions. What patterns emerge? Where do you see growth, and where do you see stagnation? In time, you will see yourself clearly, and that clarity will be the foundation of your strength. You will begin to notice the illusions that once held sway over you, the false narratives, the conditioned beliefs, the opinions of others that shaped your self-perception. As the fog of external influence dissipates, you will stand firmly in the reality of your own existence, unshaken by the changing tides of social approval or criticism. This clarity is not just intellectual, but deeply transformative. It grants you a new way of seeing the world, of assessing your own actions, and of understanding your place in life. You will gain an inner stillness, an unwavering center from which all decisions flow. No longer will you act out of impulse, fear, or societal expectation, but from a place of deliberate thought and wisdom. Each day in solitude sharpens this vision, carving away the unnecessary and leaving only what is true and essential. Through this self-awareness, you will cultivate a sense of purpose that is entirely your own. Your values will no longer be dictated by fleeting cultural trends or inherited dogmas, but by a deep and profound connection to your own inner truth. This is the foundation upon which an unbreakable character is built, a character that does not waver in adversity, does not crumble under pressure, and does not seek validation from outside sources. And in this newfound clarity, you will discover freedom. The freedom to be yourself without apology, the freedom to walk your own path without hesitation, the freedom to define success on your own terms, rather than allowing it to be defined for you. With solitude as your guide and self-knowledge as your compass, you will move through life with a confidence and tranquility that few ever achieve. Chapter 3. The Strength of Stillness. Stillness is not laziness. It is the highest form of discipline. The man who can sit in silence, undisturbed, is the man who has mastered himself. In stillness, a person gains clarity, unclouded by the noise of daily distractions. The world rushes forward, demanding reaction, demanding movement. But the individual who has mastered the art of stillness knows that true wisdom is not found in reaction, but in deliberate thought. The modern world glorifies activity. People believe that movement is progress. They believe that to be busy is to be successful, that to be constantly engaged is to be productive. But the Stoics knew better. True power is found in stillness, in the ability to sit with your own thoughts without distraction, without restlessness. The ability to do nothing and remain at peace is the greatest test of discipline. It is in those moments of stillness that we realize how much of our energy is wasted on things that do not matter. It is in stillness that we begin to master our impulses, to detach from the fleeting desires that pull us in every direction. Seneca wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." The man who cannot sit still, who cannot embrace solitude, is a man who will never know peace. He will always be chasing something, chasing approval, chasing entertainment, chasing external validation. He is always reacting, always in motion, never in control. He jumps from one distraction to another, believing that fulfillment lies just beyond the next interaction, the next achievement, the next moment of fleeting excitement. But in reality, he is avoiding himself. He is running from the silence because he fears what it might reveal. The man who practices stillness, however, becomes impenetrable. He does not merely endure solitude, he thrives in it. He is unmoved by the chaos of the world. He does not let his mind be dragged in 1,000 directions. Instead, he anchors himself in the present, in the quiet, in the understanding that he needs nothing outside of himself to be complete. He is not dependent on external validation because he has already validated himself. He does not seek meaning in the noise because he has discovered meaning within. Stillness is not about inaction, it is about control. It is the ability to stop and listen to the deeper currents of your mind. It is the space where strategy is formed, where insight is gained, where wisdom is nurtured. True stillness is not passivity, but a mastery of attention. It is the ability to detach from distraction and focus entirely on what is essential. The man who cultivates stillness becomes a master of his emotions, no longer ruled by impulse or external pressure. He is like a mountain, unshaken by the winds of the world, steady and unmovable in his purpose. Stillness is an act of defiance in a world that demands constant action. It is a refusal to be swept away by the tide of meaningless activity. It is the foundation of resilience, clarity, and true inner strength. Those who can master stillness can master themselves, and those who can master themselves can master anything. Practice stillness. Sit for 10 minutes each day with no agenda, no goal, just stillness. Breathe deeply, allowing each inhale to ground you further into the moment. Resist the urge to fill the silence with thought or action. Instead, surrender to the quiet, letting it envelop you like a protective cocoon. At first, your mind may rebel, restless and eager for stimulation. Let these thoughts pass without attachment, like leaves drifting along a stream. Gradually, as you persist in this practice, you will notice a shift. The mind settles, like a pond untouched by wind, its surface no longer rippling with distraction. In this clarity, you begin to see yourself with greater honesty. You notice your habitual thoughts, the emotions that frequently rise, and the subtle patterns that dictate your behavior. In this space, understanding emerges of yourself, of your desires, and of what truly matters. Extend the practice over time. Move from 10 minutes to 20, then longer. Observe how your awareness deepens, how moments of stillness bring insights that were previously drowned out by the noise of daily life. In stillness, the mind refines itself, becoming sharper, more focused, and more resilient. Over time, you will carry this cultivated calm into every aspect of life, allowing you to move through the world with unshakable composure and purpose. Chapter 4. The Inner Fortress. Your mind is your fortress. If it is weak, you are at the mercy of the world. If it is strong, nothing can shake you. The mind, like a fortress, requires walls to protect it from unnecessary distractions, intrusions, and influences that seek to erode its strength. It is in solitude that you construct these walls, brick by brick, through discipline, introspection, and the cultivation of wisdom. The Stoics spoke of cultivating an inner citadel, an unbreakable core of wisdom and discipline that no external force could penetrate. This fortress is built in solitude. It is in solitude that you strengthen your mind, that you learn self-reliance, that you develop unshakable resilience. In this stillness, you reinforce your ability to think independently, to filter out the noise of the world, and to guard your inner peace from the chaos that others willingly invite into their lives. Every moment spent in silence is another stone laid into the foundation of your fortress, each one making it stronger, more resilient, more impervious to the distractions and disturbances of the outside world. If you cannot be alone, you cannot be strong. If you need constant validation, you are a slave to the opinions of others. A fortress that relies on the approval of outsiders for its stability is already compromised. To depend on the shifting tides of public perception is to build on weak ground, to subject yourself to forces beyond your control. True freedom is found in the ability to stand alone, confident and unwavering, anchored in your own principles rather than in the fleeting judgments of others. It is in solitude that you become the architect of your own mind, deciding what enters and what is cast aside. You determine the materials with which you build, whether they are principles of integrity, patience and self-mastery, or the fragile scaffolding of external validation and shallow distractions. With each moment of solitude, you add another layer to your fortress, fortifying it against the storms of life. The more you invest in solitude, the stronger your inner walls become. They become impenetrable to the trivialities that consume the minds of those who lack this sanctuary. Your fortress must not be made of fragile stone, susceptible to erosion by criticism, failure, or hardship. It must be fortified with unshakable resolve, patience, and the wisdom to understand that external chaos need not dictate your internal state. The mind, when trained in solitude, becomes an entity of its own, a sanctuary capable of sustaining itself without the need for external reinforcement. The more you refine your solitude, the more you realize that strength is not just about endurance, but about the ability to remain unshaken in the face of adversity. When the world outside is turbulent, your inner citadel remains untouched. It becomes a source of clarity, a retreat where you are no longer at the mercy of fleeting emotions, distractions, or external expectations. A mind fortified in solitude does not react impulsively. It responds with wisdom. It does not waver in the face of criticism or failure. It learns and grows stronger. It does not fear solitude. It thrives in it, drawing power from its depths. This is why the greatest minds throughout history have sought solitude, not as an escape, but as a means of refinement. A soldier does not sharpen his sword in the heat of battle, but in the quiet before it. A philosopher does not form his thoughts in the chaos of the crowd, but in the sanctuary of his own mind. The strongest individuals are not those who surround themselves with constant noise, but those who can sit alone in silence and emerge with clarity, purpose, and unshakable discipline. The stronger your fortress, the less the world can shake you, and the more you will command your own destiny. You will no longer be a leaf tossed by the winds of circumstance, but the mountain that stands unmoved in the face of the storm. You will recognize that solitude is not a punishment, but a privilege, a chance to cultivate the kind of strength that does not need to announce itself, the kind of wisdom that does not seek approval, and the kind of discipline that turns challenges into opportunities. Solitude is where the weak fear to tread, but where the strong are forged. Detach from external validation. Stop seeking approval. Spend a week making decisions based solely on what you believe is right, without considering the opinions of others. Watch as your confidence grows. Chapter 5. Enjoying your own company. If you cannot enjoy your own company, no amount of external stimulation will fulfill you. The greatest tragedy is not to be alone, it is to feel lonely when alone. Loneliness is not the absence of others, but the absence of connection with oneself. A person who does not know how to be alone is forever dependent on the presence of others for happiness, never truly in control of their own emotional state. They seek distractions, noise and activity to avoid the discomfort of facing their own thoughts. The Stoics understood that the quality of your thoughts determines the quality of your life. If your mind is a place of chaos, solitude will be unbearable. A mind cluttered with unresolved emotions, conflicting desires, and unexamined fears becomes a prison in solitude, turning stillness into suffering. But if your mind is a place of peace, solitude will be your greatest joy. A mind cultivated in wisdom, clarity, and discipline transforms solitude into a sanctuary, a place where understanding deepens, creativity flourishes, and true independence is forged. In solitude, your mind becomes your ally, not your enemy. This is why so many people fear solitude. They have never cultivated a mind worth spending time with. They fill every silent moment with distractions, escaping into entertainment, social validation, or mindless activity, rather than confronting themselves. When left alone, they become restless, anxious, desperate for external engagement to avoid the discomfort of self-examination. This avoidance comes at a great cost, the cost of never truly knowing oneself. But the greatest thinkers, the most resilient individuals, and the most creative minds in history were those who knew how to be alone. They turned solitude into a tool for self-discovery, a training ground for mastering the mind, and a gateway to unshakable confidence. To be alone and truly content is a rare skill, one that brings freedom. When you are at peace with yourself, solitude is no longer something to avoid, but something to cherish. It becomes a time of renewal, of focus, of transformation. The world no longer dictates your emotions, you dictate them yourself. Solitude becomes a sanctuary where you refine your character, organize your thoughts, and train yourself in self-discipline. It is in solitude that your mind sharpens like a blade, where your thoughts become clearer and your actions become more intentional. You begin to understand yourself at a deeper level, what drives you, what fulfills you, what your weaknesses are, and where your strengths lie. It is in this deep introspection that clarity emerges, revealing not only who you are, but who you have the potential to become. Solitude is not loneliness, it is self-reliance. It is the ability to stand firm without the need for constant external validation. It is the realization that your worth is not determined by how many people surround you, but by the depth of your understanding and mastery of yourself. The more you cultivate solitude, the more you develop a mind that is strong, disciplined, and capable of enduring challenges without crumbling. You become the master of your emotions, no longer swayed by the whims of others, no longer dependent on fleeting interactions to define your sense of worth. Solitude teaches you that everything you seek, clarity, strength, wisdom, already exists within you. You simply need to remove the distractions and give yourself the space to find it. To embrace solitude is to embrace self-sufficiency. You are no longer at the mercy of external forces. You become your own anchor, your own refuge. Solitude allows you to cultivate an inner world so rich, so vast, that you no longer crave constant stimulation from the outside. You become content with your own presence, realizing that the greatest conversations you will ever have are the ones you have with yourself. Your mind becomes your mentor, your thoughts, your guiding force. It is in this deep state of self-awareness that true personal growth takes place. And in that state of self-sufficiency, you find that you are never truly alone because you are in the best company possible, your own. The silence that once seemed unbearable now becomes a source of wisdom and strength. You begin to look forward to solitude, to the quiet moments where you can retreat inward and gain fresh insight into your life. Solitude ceases to be something to fear and transforms into something to seek, a place where you refine your thoughts, fortify your spirit, and emerge each time stronger, wiser, and more in control of your own destiny. In solitude, you become a force of nature, unshaken, unwavering, and truly free. Develop a rich inner world. Read deeply, immersing yourself in the wisdom of the past and the insights of the present. Let literature, philosophy, and knowledge be your closest companions. Think deeply, not just about abstract ideas, but about your own life, your choices, your values. Allow your mind to engage with complex thoughts, to question assumptions, and to explore perspectives beyond your own. Cultivate hobbies that do not require external stimulation. Engage in pursuits that demand patience, focus, and introspection. Write to clarify your thoughts, paint to express your emotions, play an instrument to refine your discipline, or practice meditation to enhance your awareness. Learn to enjoy the simple, quiet moments, sitting in stillness, observing the world, and contemplating your place in it. Make your mind a place worth inhabiting, a sanctuary of wisdom, creativity, and discipline. A well-cultivated mind becomes an endless source of fulfillment, a refuge that sustains you through all of life's storms. When you enrich your inner world, solitude transforms from something to be feared into something to be cherished. You will no longer seek distractions because your own mind will be a world of depth, discovery, and meaning. Chapter 6. The Creative Mind. Creativity thrives in solitude. The greatest thinkers, artists, and philosophers did not create in chaos. They retreated into solitude, into quiet, where ideas could form freely. It is in moments of stillness that the mind begins to connect the dots, linking disparate thoughts into new insights. Solitude grants the space needed for the imagination to expand beyond the constraints of the external world, allowing originality to emerge unfiltered by outside influence. Seneca said, "Associate with people who are likely to improve you." But the greatest teacher, the greatest companion, is often your own mind when given space to think. The most profound breakthroughs happen when one steps away from the noise, from the demands of society, and into the vast, unexplored landscape of the mind. The ancient Stoics, writers, and inventors all knew this truth. Solitude is not merely the absence of others, but the presence of deep, uninterrupted thought. It is in these moments of detachment that one's mental faculties expand beyond their usual limits, free from external constraints and influences. Solitude is the raw material from which masterpieces, philosophies, and groundbreaking ideas are crafted. Most people drown their creativity in noise. They fill every empty moment with distraction, numbing their potential for great ideas with endless stimulation. They reach for their phones, fill their ears with constant sound, and rarely allow themselves to sit in true silence. This barrage of external input suffocates creativity, preventing the mind from weaving together ideas in novel ways. But the man who embraces solitude finds that his mind is a wellspring of ideas. When external noise is removed, the internal voice becomes louder, clearer, more inspired. The mind, left to wander without interruption, becomes a source of infinite creativity, finding solutions, generating art, and forming connections that would otherwise remain hidden beneath layers of distraction. The modern world, with its constant notifications and information overload, leaves little room for creative thought. It conditions people to consume rather than create, to react rather than contemplate. People mistake busyness for productivity, mistaking motion for progress. But true creative breakthroughs do not arise from constant activity. They arise from space, from stillness, from the deep mental freedom found in solitude. The mind, like a vast landscape, must be given room to breathe, to wander, to explore new possibilities without the constraints of external expectations. It is only in these undistracted moments that thoughts take their full shape, refining themselves into something truly transformative. The world demands instant responses. Social media, instant messaging, and endless notifications keep people tethered to reaction rather than reflection. Yet creativity does not thrive under pressure or in the midst of a storm of distractions. It flourishes in silence, in patience, in the slow unfolding of thought that occurs when one is left alone to think. The most profound ideas are not found in the crowded marketplace, but in the silent retreat of an undisturbed mind. It is in those moments of quiet solitude that the mind is free to connect the dots, to see patterns that were once hidden, to create something truly original. But those who dare to step away, who carve out time for deep thought, are the ones who build, innovate, and revolutionize. Solitude does not stifle creativity, it amplifies it, providing the necessary environment for ideas to take root and flourish. It allows the mind to process deeply, to synthesize knowledge, to envision new possibilities. Solitude is the artist's studio, the writer's empty page, the philosopher's silent meditation. The great artists, writers, and thinkers of history did not develop their ideas in chaos. They sought solitude, recognizing that it was the fertile ground in which brilliance could grow. Their masterpieces were not crafted in the clamor of constant distraction, but in the depth of deep reflection, in the sanctuary of a mind left undisturbed. When you make solitude your ally, creativity flows not in forced bursts, but in a continuous stream of insight and inspiration. The more time you spend in solitude, the more you cultivate the ability to think deeply, to create without inhibition, to develop ideas that are truly your own. Your thoughts no longer compete with the voices of the world. Instead, they are given space to breathe, to expand, to transform into something remarkable. In solitude, creativity does not fade. It flourishes, unrestrained by the noise of a world that rarely dares to pause. Give yourself time to think. Step away from distractions. Let your mind wander freely, without expectation or restriction. Allow thoughts to take shape, without forcing them into immediate conclusions. Sit in silence and observe the patterns of your mind, the way ideas surface and evolve when left undisturbed. Create an environment that nurtures deep thinking. Spend time in nature, where the rhythm of life moves slower and distractions fade into the background. Walk alone, letting your mind drift between structured contemplation and effortless daydreaming. Capture spontaneous thoughts, as inspiration often strikes in moments of stillness. When you write, do not censor yourself. Record everything, no matter how fragmented or abstract. Ideas need space to breathe before they can be refined. You will be shocked at the brilliance that emerges from the silence. Without the constant input of external voices, your mind becomes a wellspring of original thought. New perspectives arise, creativity flows naturally, and solutions to problems become clearer. The greatest insights often come not when you are actively searching for them, but when you give yourself permission to simply be, to exist in a space where your thoughts can unfold organically, revealing depths of understanding that remain hidden in the noise of daily life. Chapter 7. Order and Discipline. A man in solitude is a man in control. He organizes his thoughts, his emotions, his life. Without solitude, chaos reigns. When a man lacks time alone, his mind is pulled in too many directions, influenced by external forces, opinions, and distractions. But when he deliberately steps into solitude, he regains mastery over himself. He sets his own priorities, aligns his actions with his values, and strengthens his mental discipline. It is in these quiet moments that he gains clarity about his goals, his strengths, and his weaknesses. Discipline is forged in solitude. The Stoics practiced self-control, fasting from food, comfort, and pleasure to strengthen their will. They knew that a man who could master himself in solitude could master anything. When you are alone, you are accountable only to yourself. There is no external pressure to perform, no audience to impress, no expectations to fulfill. This is where the true test of discipline begins, when no one is watching, when there are no rewards, and when the only validation comes from within. In this space you refine your habits, fortify your willpower, and cultivate an unbreakable sense of discipline that is not dependent on external motivation, but driven by an internal compass of self-mastery. Solitude strips away the distractions and the excuses. It places you face to face with your own limitations, your own weaknesses, and forces you to confront them. It is easy to maintain discipline when surrounded by external accountability, but the man who can hold himself to the highest standard without the influence of others is truly rare. This is the foundation upon which greatness is built. Every great leader, philosopher, and warrior throughout history has understood this. Mastery of the self is the foundation for mastery of the world. The battlefield of self-discipline is fought and won in solitude, where the mind sharpens, the body strengthens, and the spirit becomes resilient. Solitude is not a retreat, it is a crucible, a place where the weak become strong and the strong become unshakable. In the silence, you train your mind to endure discomfort, to resist the temptations of distraction, to forge a character that does not waver. Solitude becomes the proving ground where you mold yourself into the person you are meant to be. The man who embraces solitude does not break under pressure, he thrives under it. He emerges from his time alone with a mind that is sharper, a will that is stronger, and a sense of purpose that is unwavering. Set structure in your solitude. Have a routine. Dedicate time to thought, to study, to exercise. Do not let solitude become stagnation. Let it be the furnace in which you refine yourself. Chapter 8. The Path to Mastery. The path to mastery begins with solitude. Those who wish to excel, to rise above mediocrity, must first learn to be alone. For it is in solitude that one can devote time to true practice, to focused effort, and to the refinement of both skill and mind. Throughout history, the greatest warriors, scholars, and artists have sought solitude as a means of elevating themselves beyond the ordinary. Leonardo da Vinci secluded himself for hours at a time, sketching, contemplating, and refining his craft. Marcus Aurelius wrote his deepest reflections alone in the quiet hours of the morning. Nikola Tesla would disappear for months, lost in deep thought, crafting innovations that changed the world. These men understood that mastery is not developed in the clamor of distraction, but in the focused stillness of self-discipline. To master anything, you must first master yourself. Solitude is the training ground for self-discipline, for patience, and for the kind of deep, uninterrupted work that leads to true expertise. In solitude, you are not beholden to the expectations of others. You are free to experiment, to fail, to try again, without judgment or interference. The mind becomes sharper when left to its own devices, unburdened by external pressures, and capable of immense growth. Identify an area of your life where you seek mastery. Dedicate 1 hour a day in solitude to focused practice. Whether it is writing, physical training, meditation, or the study of philosophy, immerse yourself without distraction. Over time, you will witness the compounding effect of uninterrupted, deliberate effort. Chapter 9. Strengthening the will. A weak will is the result of constant external dependence. When a man cannot be alone, he cannot be strong. His thoughts are dictated by the voices around him, his emotions swayed by the opinions of others, his actions influenced by fleeting impulses rather than inner resolve. He becomes a puppet to the world, reacting rather than acting, moving with the shifting tides rather than standing firm in his own convictions. His self-worth fluctuates, tied to external validation, never rooted in something unshakable within himself. The Stoics taught that strength comes from within, from the ability to endure, to remain steadfast in the face of adversity, and to govern oneself regardless of external conditions. Epictetus instructed his students to embrace hardship as a means of tempering the soul. Seneca reminded us that luxury weakens a man, while difficulty strengthens him. A life of ease fosters dependence, but adversity creates resilience. A man who is tested in solitude is a man who has met himself in the purest form, without distractions, without escape, and has forged himself into something stronger. Solitude is the training ground for this resilience. When you sit in silence with no one to lean on but yourself, you learn to endure discomfort. You confront your own fears and weaknesses. You develop the ability to suffer without complaint, to act without seeking approval, and to think with clarity even in the midst of hardship. The man who can endure solitude is the man who can endure anything. He has built an inner citadel, a fortress of the mind that cannot be breached by the trivial concerns of the outside world. He learns not to seek comfort in distractions, but to find power in stillness. He no longer reacts impulsively. Embrace voluntary discomfort in solitude. Fast for a day, train in silence, or remove unnecessary luxuries from your routine. Learn to sit with discomfort rather than avoid it. Each act of voluntary hardship builds inner strength, preparing you for life's inevitable difficulties. Chapter 10. The Death of the Ego. The ego thrives on distraction. It demands validation, it seeks recognition, and it is terrified of being alone. It builds itself upon external affirmations, feeding on applause, acknowledgement, and the opinions of others. But solitude is the great destroyer of illusion. It strips away the false self, revealing who we truly are beneath the layers of performance. It dismantles the fragile identity constructed to please the world and forces us to stand in the stark reality of our own being. Many fear solitude because it forces them to confront their own insignificance. When you sit alone, without status, without validation, without an audience, you are left only with yourself. The noise of the world fades, and in its place remains an unfiltered reflection of who you are, not as society sees you, but as you truly exist. It is here that the ego fights hardest, resisting the truth that it is not as important as it would like to believe. It clings to external attachments, to fleeting impressions, desperate to maintain the illusion of control, of self-importance. But solitude exposes its weakness, its dependency, and its artificial nature. Yet it is in solitude that the ego dies and the real self emerges. The Stoics taught that humility is the path to wisdom. A man who can be alone, who can exist without the need for validation, is a man who is truly free. He no longer defines himself by external status, but by the quiet, unshakable knowledge of who he is. He is no longer controlled by the need to be seen, to be recognized, to be admired. He operates from a deeper understanding, one rooted in reality rather than illusion. In this space of solitude, true transformation occurs. the shedding of falsehoods, the embracing of authenticity, and the realization that true strength lies not in seeking approval, but in mastering the self. Practice anonymity. Spend time in solitude where no one knows your name, where you do not seek approval, where you do not engage in the need to be recognized. Observe how your ego reacts, then learn to let go of its demands. Chapter 11. The Power of Observation. Solitude sharpens the senses. It allows you to observe the world with clarity, to notice what others overlook, and to see the patterns that govern life. The Stoics believed in observation as a means of understanding both the self and the universe. Marcus Aurelius would often reflect on the behavior of others, analyzing their actions, their desires, and their flaws, not to judge them, but to learn from them. When you spend time in solitude, you become more aware. You notice the subtleties in conversation, the hidden motivations behind people's words, the inconsistencies in their actions. You see how most are driven by impulse, how they react rather than respond, and how they remain unaware of their own conditioning. But more importantly, solitude allows you to observe yourself. You begin to notice your own reactions, your own patterns of thought, your own weaknesses. You see where your emotions control you, where your mind is clouded by bias, and where your actions betray your values. Chapter 12. Emerging from solitude. Solitude is not a permanent retreat. It is a necessary phase of transformation. Just as a warrior trains in seclusion before battle, just as a philosopher contemplates before speaking, just as a craftsman refines his skills before presenting his work to the world, solitude prepares you to return stronger, wiser, and more capable. When you emerge from solitude, you do so with clarity. You are no longer dependent on the noise of society to define your path. You carry within you the strength of stillness, the power of deep thought, and the resilience that solitude has forged. You engage with the world not out of necessity, but from a place of choice. Your relationships become intentional, your actions deliberate, your purpose unshakable. But most importantly, you no longer fear solitude, because you know it is your greatest ally. You understand that whenever life becomes overwhelming, whenever you lose your way, you can always retreat back into the silence, recalibrate, and emerge anew. Make solitude a lifelong practice. Schedule regular periods of retreat, whether an hour, a day, or longer, to reconnect with yourself. Solitude is not a one-time event, but an ongoing discipline that strengthens the mind and fortifies the soul. The modern world fears solitude. It pushes distraction, noise, and constant engagement, convincing us that to be alone is to be incomplete. But the Stoics knew better. They knew that solitude is not isolation, it is empowerment. It is the key to mastering the mind, to sharpening the will, to understanding oneself at the deepest level. Through solitude, you become stronger. Through solitude, you become wiser. Through solitude, you become unshakable. Learn to embrace it, seek it out, make it a part of your life. And in doing so, you will find not only yourself, but the strength, wisdom, and freedom that so many spend their lives searching for in all the wrong places. Solitude is not a prison. It is your salvation.